Right now our key light is mainly represented by a pretty large and soft source. But that doesn't mean that we cannot throw in some directionality into it by making use of a much smaller pinpoint light source for extra glints and highlights. So again, this is our nice, soft and big light source that is responsible for 90% of the image, for all the shapes and forms that we see, and I will move it to its own collection by pressing the M key. The collection will be called Light01. Now I will right click and duplicate this light source, hit S and make it much smaller, M to move it to its own collection called Light_02. This will be the extra component of our key light. Thinking about it, it will also serve the function of the hair light simultaneously, using the 3-point lighting terminology. We will talk about 3-point lighting later on. Let's just mention that 3-point lighting is a fairly popular method for illuminating a subject with light sources from 3 distinct positions. The 3 types of lights are key, fill and backlight. The key light is usually the brightest light, placed slightly off to the side to provide most important part of the lighting to our subject, revealing its form and dimension. The fill light to illuminate the shadow side. And the backlight, it's also called the hair light or the rim light, is used to pop the subject out of the background for a slightly more 3-dimensional look. As we've said, this scheme is fairly popular in cinema, photography and CG lighting, so we'll be referring to it from time to time throughout this course. So getting back to the second light we have just added, it's the secondary key light, but at the same time it's the backlight that adds some extra separation to the objects in our 3D scene, so it kind of fulfills both of these functions. I mean, its main purpose will be to highlight the finer details in the silhouette as well as the glossier parts of the material. To add some extra separation with the main light, it can be slightly warmer. And by all means, it shouldn't be stronger than our main. Think of it as a supplementary touch, as just a little bit of glint on top of our main softness. So something like that. It can be slightly more focused in terms of the beam shape spread. Something like 70 degrees looks good to me. What I love about the smaller and harsher light sources is that they are good at capturing detail. It's something that the bigger and softer light sources don't necessarily achieve. And now, as a quick detour, let's quickly visit the Cycles render settings, untick the noise threshold and just input some value into the samples, like 128 samples in both render and the viewport. And also let's activate the denoiser. If there is one feature that was a total game changer in Cycles rendering, that's the denoising. A quick reminder that the options found here in the denoise settings will be dependent on the graphics card, and that while they give slightly different results, any option is better than none. So don't worry, just select whatever you like. Now that's a fantastic advice. Like, select anything you want. But really, OptiX is just as good as OpenImage Denoise. It is insane how smoother the rendering process gets with the use of denoising. I'm not even talking about the viewport. In my opinion, that just brings the dream of the real-time light transport and real-time path tracing much closer. So let's keep it activated. Denoising, I mean. It has its own minor performance price though. Without denoising, it's generally a little bit more responsive, the viewport I mean. With denoising, the overall effect is smoother, but the lag is still there. Alright, so here we created the compound light source. We can think about it as just one big key light, with just a little nuance, a little hint created by this smaller, sharper source embedded into it. The smaller light in this context is just complementary to the main one. I think it's the most productive way of thinking about it. Now here's how we can do quick comparisons to track our progress. What I'll do is set up 2 renders, with and without that second light. So let's toggle it off in the outliner temporarily. Okay, before giving it a quick render, allow me to visit the Blender settings, the preferences I mean. And in the user interface, let's make sure that within the temporary editors tab, the render in drop-down menu, the image editor is selected. It is a matter of personal preference, obviously, but personally I prefer to see the result in the Blender user interface when I hit the render button, without 3ds Maxing it with a bunch of new windows. Alright, so we have rendered the 1080p image. Now we can make a quick comparison. I'm switching to the second slot in the image editor and activating the second light component and hitting F12. That's a nice way of comparing before and after by switching back and forth between the slots. We can do it with using the number keys. 1, 2, 1, 2. See the glossy highlights popped out and being extracted by the secondary light source? Good job. Let's check a quick before and after. This is our extra light added into the mix, so it's worth recapping a few crucial points. First of all, our light hits the object from behind, so to speak. This seemingly innocent creative choice makes all the shadows fall in our direction, so effectively we now shoot into shadows. In other words, the camera is always standing on the shadow side. This is called the reverse key lighting or the upstage lighting. The other thing definitely worth mentioning is that our light source is brought in very close to the subject, to the scene, and so we can marvel at the light fall-off effect. That is simply put aesthetically pleasing. Well, we could have placed our light to the right or to the left as long as it's on the opposite side from the camera. It would still be the reverse key lighting, and we would still have some kind of a fill coming in from the camera side. So far it is a really balanced, really three-dimensional light setup. I love it.